For more on this story, we can bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Good afternoon, Rob. How did Georgia get to this point?
Well, I mean, this is the big question. How do we get from a position where Georgia was regarded as the sort of blue-eyed boy of the Western world, you know, the model of how to transform from authoritarian rule to democracy, to the point where the leader of the largest opposition party is thrown in jail, you know, after special forces storm the party headquarters? It's a remarkable turnaround in very few years. Do you remember in the early 2000s, Mikhail Saakashvili took control as a Rose Revolution. Massive reforms took place and transformed Georgia into the sort of country that we have now, a functioning country rather than the dysfunctioning country, failed state that we had at the beginning of the century. There were new elections in 2012 because there were failings inside Mikhail Saakashvili's party. He was drifting towards repression, but there were elections, and there was a legal democratic transfer of power. The Georgian Dream Party came into office, led by a man called Bidzini Ivanishvili, immensely wealthy. His wealth is put at somewhere around $5 billion US dollars. That's about 25% of Georgia's GDP. And unfortunately, I think to some extent, his disproportionate wealth, you know, for a country that is so poor, lies behind much of what has happened in Georgia. He has been able to call the tune in Georgia for the last 8 years or so to give a disproportionate advantage to the Georgian Dream Party, and has allowed, under his effective rule, corruption to seep back into Georgian political life, repression to get worse again in Georgian political life, and to get to the situation where we are now. Nika Melia, the politician who's been put in prison, was arrested following a demonstration in June 2019. Unexpectedly to speak in the Georgian parliament. Remember, Russia and Georgia had been at war not very long before. 20% of the country still occupied by Russian forces. That provoked outrage in Georgia. There were massive demonstrations. The police took very strong measures. 275 people arrested, many people injured. 2 or 3 people lost eyes because of rubber bullets. Nika Melia was accused of urging the demonstrators to storm the parliament, and was given a sentence at the time. He was released on bail and is now accused of breaking the terms of his bail. That's how we got to here.
And Rob, you've explained how we've got to this point. How do we get out of it now?
Well, this is really the big problem, I think. Whether is I think a sliver of hope is that both sides of the Georgian political spectrum, which are no longer at the point where they can even communicate with each other, nevertheless are committed to joining the so-called Euro-Atlantic community of states. Both, on paper at least, are committed to democratization of the country. Both aspire to Georgia becoming part of the European Union. And that, I think, gives an opportunity for the European Union, which has poured immense amounts of money and political effort into Georgia, to take a role in trying to mediate this conflict. There is a possibility, I think, you know, if the government can be persuaded to push the country towards new elections towards the end of this year. The opposition refused to accept the elections in October last year, accusing them of being falsified, and refused to take its place inside that parliament. This is an opportunity for both sides to come together again, although at this stage it doesn't look like the government side is prepared to move in that direction, saying as far as it's concerned, there is going to be no discussion of fresh elections. But the pressure is clearly going to grow from the West. The criticism that the government has faced in the last 24 hours is unprecedented from the West, from the United States, from the European Union, from NATO, you know, all major allies of Georgia over the past few years. And I think, you know, the government is already being forced to sit up and pay attention. So if there is a chance, I think it lies in that direction. But elections by themselves don't resolve anything unless the two sides can find a way of communicating with each other, which doesn't threaten the future stability of the state.
Rob, thank you very much for that. Rob Parsons there.